Finally, the time has come. For all those people who know me, I am Richard, and when I describe myself, I go Dungeon Master, Student, Writer, but out of all the various skills I have, Chef, Coffee Connoisseur, Cat Photographer. Dungeon Master is the one I'm most proud of, because of all my talents, that is by far the hardest one. And we're going to be talking Dungeons and Dragons on today's episode of Deep Space and Dragons and Dungeons. I am the Dungeon Master, Richard.
I am the Sorcerer's Apprentice, Karl.
Yes! Good answer. Alright, so let's start off with what's new in the Caves of Carlos.
Ooh, my house is much nicer than a cave now, I'll have you know.
You used to tell me about the suspicious part on the floor that probably would emit spikes, but please continue.
So I have a friend. He really, really loves D&D. He loves doing D&D, but he very rarely can commit to a full like actual campaign because you'll start going for a month or two, and then suddenly he has to go to Timbuktu to take radioactive photos of pipelines and stuff.
That is not who I thought you were describing, but please continue. That swerved.
But he is free for the next month or so because he has to do some schooling for his work, and so he's not traveling. And so I decided, since he loves D&D so much, and I don't have any other D&D campaigns going on right now, that I would run like I'm calling it an extended one shot because it's only designed to be 4 sessions.
Yeah.
But I ran my first session of my. I suppose it is a homebrew campaign, and because he doesn't get to play up to level 13 very often, since most people want to start at level 1 and then you go all the way up, right?
Or some DMs like me force people to start at level 1 because that at least makes them have to read their good anyway. Redacted.
He was like, he asked me if we could start at a higher level, and he suggested level 13. I was like, you know what? Fine, whatever. We'll just start at level 13. Jump right into the middle of things.
There's only like 5 players I would trust to start that high level and not be overwhelmed by how much power they have.
well, my brother. It's a hilarious D&D moment. So the 4 of them, I decided they were contracted independently of their various adventuring parties to escort someone to what was at the very least a dragon's lair at some point. But the dragon hasn't been seen in several years, and there's been rumors that the dragon has been slain, and this guy's like, well, I need to get this book for my research, so I need you guys to escort me to this dragon's lair and see if this book is still here. And then if the treasures are still there, the party can keep the treasures and they go on their ways. Mm-hmm. But so they get to the cave and they go in through a secret back entrance. And I don't know how many of them will be listening to this. Maybe I shouldn't spoil the magic.
Oh, spoil the magic. Do it. Do it.
I have the Tales of the Yawning Portal book. And I've run the Against Giants module before. But I didn't use every single part of it because it's just too long, and I was trying for a different style at that time. Yeah. So I just took pieces from that module that I thought would be like, this is a cool cave room here. And one of the rooms, there's 3 ropers, which are indistinguishable from cave formations such as stalagmites and stalactites.
Yep.
While they're not moving. And then they have a 50-foot tendril that they get 4 of these tendril attacks where they just grapple you. And then they get 1 real attack where they pull you in 25 feet. And then they get 1 bite attack, which is 48 plus 4 for damage. Mm-hmm. And so my brother uses detect traps. There's no traps.
Oh, is this the Orb of Annihilation nonsense again? But we'll get to that.
And then my other player, the one that I basically make this campaign for, he uses detect magic. He's like, oh yeah, there's no magic. And then they still get caught by the not trap, not magic death pit with these ropers. But because they grapple you, they're incredibly hard to you can't. They have an AC of 20, which makes them pretty hard to hit when you have disadvantage.
Yep.
Which you have because you're restrained by the grapple. And then you have disadvantage on the strength check to get out, so it's hard to get out. And if you want to attack the ropes, well, you have disadvantage on attacking the ropes. And so they're actually surprisingly tough enemies for only being a challenge rating 5. But, so after this grueling fight, they go down the cave, and the next room seems to be lit up. But they've been stealthy. So they sneak up, and they see the cave is full of fire beetles. That's why it's lit up. And there's 12 of them, and they're like, oh man, that last room was intense. What do we do about these fire beetles? So my brother, he's like, you know what? I'm just going to use insect plague on them. 7th level spell. Let's just power through this room. So he blasts out a level 7 insect plague and deals like 50 damage to all these poor beetles that only have 4 HP because they're challenge rating 0.
I do love me some D&D stories. So, to directly follow up with what's new with me, I've also started a different kind of D&D campaign.
Ooh.
So my regular campaigns are on hold at the moment due to figuring out various social dynamics. So I started a play-by-post campaign for my creative writing and publishing cohort. The idea is that each person typically gets one action, and then I look what everyone does, narrate the scenario, and advance the story. I've been running the D&D Essentials kit because it's basically Lost Mine and Feldelver if you've already used up Lost Mine and Feldelver. I start everyone at level 1 because with new players, I don't trust them to have more than 3 abilities and know what they all do.
Right.
Because I'm fair and balanced coverage. What's cool about this campaign is this map has 20 locations on it. Every time they travel, you roll a d20 to see where the dragon is. The idea is supposed to be that this dragon torments them, and then at the end of the campaign at like level 6, they go and finally kill the dragon. So for this play-by-post, like for example, I'll be like, welcome to the dungeon, describe the first room, you all get one action. So person A will be like, well, I loot and look for traps. Person B will be like, I check for monsters. So it actually runs really smoothly. I did add some new rules to change up combat, where effectively, I have everyone roll initiative. But because it's being played asynchronously and everyone's typing up, because it's being played entirely over text, like typing up paragraphs and descriptions, what I do is I have everyone tell me their action in a descriptive paragraph, and then make a dice roll and roll attack and damage under the assumption it would hit, even if it doesn't. And then I then shadow run the battle. Like if someone says run up and attack with a sword, I'm not going to say that their enemy's out of range unless it like was specifically declared. Like I pretty much an enemy would have to waste a turn to not be in range, or the player would have to say I specifically get out of range, right? And then I give a 1 paragraph describing how everyone's action plays out in sequence and how the enemy's actions. And then the next round is where they'd use any reactions. So I allowed a lot of takebacks and retconning in this because of how it's being played.
Right.
But what's funny is I let players roll this d20 to see where the dragon is. It's countered the dragon 4 times.
Okay.
So everywhere they go, the dragon just shows up to torment them.
Yeah.
So the first time they fought the dragon, and this is like if any of my players are listening to this podcast, I'm sorry for the information about to reveal, I actually had to up its size from a young dragon to an adult dragon because they would have just killed the young dragon on the second encounter.
Wow.
Well, D&D scaling is weird. Because of action economy, if you have a 6-person party, and something's like, I'm challenge rating deadly, the players will probably still kill it. At least in my experience. So, now there's this adult dragon, legendary actions and all. There's a scene where the dragon's like, I'm like, you guys could try talking to it. And the dragon said, leave all your positions and go. And it's like, does the dragon want us to like take off our clothes? It's like, insight check. Yeah, this is not about the stuff, it's about your dignity. As long as you leave with your dignity destroyed, the dragon will be content. So they make it back to town with no supplies, where like a group of wolves attacking them was a threat because no one has any armor or weapons. They make their way back, And then the dragon shows up again, and I'm having them roll this dice, which is what makes it so profoundly funny.
Yeah, okay.
So they're currently fighting this dragon for the third time, but one of my players is one of those players who is like, well, this is some bullshit. I'm fighting this dragon at level 3. How are we supposed to win? And I'm like, it's a role-playing game, and I, as a DM, let you do anything. So, you know, come up with something.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I have literally let the party pretend to be holding a wedding to distract an enemy. Like,
Yeah.
you've played in my campaigns. I'll let players do anything amusing. I let you make a boat out of stone one time.
Yeah, that was great.
It really
Anyways.
was. So this campaign's been going very slowly because it's like each person acts and I move it forward. And I've changed the fights to last typically 3 rounds only, which is usually how long a well-balanced D&D fight tends to last anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But it's funny because I do them their initiative order outside of combat, but I'll like benefit of the doubt. So say a party member's down, I'm like, if someone's planning to heal you, I'll let you still take your action. So take your action under the assumption someone helps you. And if no one helps you, then in the paragraph I'll describe, like, as you thought about running up and stabbing them, no one came to help you. As you're slowly bleeding out on the ground. Also, I decided to put... So once in a while, my sense of humor becomes canon because I can't help myself. So I never homebrew my campaigns, but then I'll just end up accidentally homebrewing my campaigns for the sake of a bit.
Mm.
So a player goes to the Luck Shrine to look for something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing actually at the Luck Shrine, because sometimes D&D books are lame, and there's just nothing there, even though it's a cool named location. So they roll an investigation to find something cool and roll a natural 1.
Ooh.
So I have them find a lucky rabbit's foot.
Right.
Which, a luck charm gives you +1 to all your rolls. It's just a good magic item.
Mm-hmm.
They then find a cave when they're running from the second dragon attack. And painted on the mural of the cave is a 3-legged rabbit murdering people from the scene from Monty Python.
Right.
Then, I trolled them for up to this point of the campaign that whenever they rolled a perception check, they saw a rabbit just right out of eyesight glaring them down. And sometimes there'd just be a rabbit eating grass and you feel incredibly uneasy. Other times they saw a rabbit with a unicorn horn hopping in the distance, but no one else could see it.
Oh,
So
I definitely love running jokes like that. Well, one of my other campaigns, one of my characters was a Harangon, which is a relatively new race.
ooh, I'm getting there, but continue, and then I'll follow up with my story.
It's a rabbit person, and then so just throughout the entire campaign, every character offers them rabbit stew.
So back to Harangon, because I'm actually going somewhere with that because it's so funny.
Yeah,
So
okay.
they find the Falcon hunting lodge where this badass elf named Falcon lives, who my players immediately turned into a thirst trap. Don't know how, don't know why. I describe this character as ambivalently as I do, and they all decide, yeah, no, this guy's hot.
Yeah, okay.
So 2 party members, 1 male, 1 female, decide to go with Falcon to hit on him. And they split the party. And they're like, should we really split the party? I'm like, sure, by all means. Because playing by post, splitting the party is not really a problem, because each person gets 1 action, and then I move the story along, right?
Right.
So the 2 people with Falcon, 1 would make like a stealth check, 1 would make a survival, and I'd narrate what happens to them. And the 3 that were staying back at Falcon's hunting lodge to finish his ballista would all roll their various checks because effectively Falcon said, you can either go on this mission and kill these orcs for me, and I'll build this ballista. Or you can build the ballista, and I'm going to go kill some orcs. And they're like, let's split the party! And I'm like, alright, you guys are choosing to split the party, that's on you. Roll to see where the dragon is. So as soon as they split the party, the dragon shows up, and there's only 3 of them here.
Right.
Which is amazing, because at this point, rolling the dragon being at your spot 3 times in a row is roughly 1 in 20,000 odds, or something like that.
Yeah, okay.
So, the party's split, and they're trying to fight off this dragon. They chop off his wing, which was actually a really poor decision, because now the dragon can't just leave.
Yeah, okay.
So now I'm like, as the DM, obligated to have this dragon try and murder them. What's this dragon going to do? It can't fly away now.
Right.
So the 2 players who are in the woods have the other half of Ascending Stone. They're like, dragon showed up, help! Ah! And I'm like, yeah, you're literally a day out specifically. You've been traveling through the woods for a day. So one of the party member of his cursed rabbit's foot's like, I pray to the rabbit for help.
Ooh.
So then I describe that he sees a regular bunny climb under a tree root. And you're like, do you follow? So he climbs through this tree route, comes out the other side as a herring gun. Right? So now, so he was very much like a, I'm gonna say like a foppy hero, like one of those like, look at me, I'm Sir Charming kind of character archetype. And now is a 4-foot tall rabbit person. And the player is loving this, that the cursed rabbit foot turned them into a rabbit. That's just storytelling gold right there. But also, herring, they were a base human, like, weren't even variant. So when I respec their race, they're like, wait, my AC's higher, my attack's higher, I have all these cool rabbit abilities, and I get to add my proficiency, my initiative. Did being cursed by the rabbit just make me stronger? I'm like, a little bit.
That's pretty funny.
Because this player's yes.
They didn't even take like variant human to give themselves a feat.
No, they're pretty new to the game.
Oh wow.
So I'm like, I switched them off of standard set variant human to point by herring gun, and all their stats went up. Because I'm like, this was a reward from them yes-anding me. Because whenever I described the rabbit thing, they would roleplay the whole like, oh my god, the were-rabbit's coming for me. I'm like, you're leaning into the roleplay so hard, I'm rewarding you with a curse. Because, just sometimes you get players who, like, they'll appreciate being cursed. Like, you would love it if definitely. I cursed your charming rogue human into a rabbit. You would enjoy that.
Yeah.
But as the fight stands right now, edgy vampire dude just got tail whipped by a dragon who blew up their ballista. And they've chopped off one of his wings, and the dragon's half dead. And that's where the current round is at. The first time they fought the dragon, a wild magic surge created a smoke screen, and then they ran away. And saved by wild magic surge is one of my favorite outcomes.
Definitely.
Because me as a DM, so I hate some of the Wizards of the Coast designs for that class, so whenever a wild magic surge could happen, it does. Whenever it's possible, I will roll on that table, because it is entertaining. They are currently blue, and I am happy.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the entire point of D&D. Like, sometimes the rules get in the way of having fun, so you just kind of got to, like, fudge them a little bit just to make the game more fun. Like, the rules are there to help players kind of understand the more of limits. And so they can actually break free of choice paralysis. But sometimes they're too restricting, and so you just kind of have to loosen up a bit so that everyone can enjoy the game and actually do what they want to do, Yeah,
and that's why I'm really liking this type up a paragraph to describe what you're doing under the assumption you succeed. Because that lets me as a DM have some fun with it. Like a person's like, I'm running off and chopping off their wing, and they roll a natural 20. I let them run up and chop off a wing. They can have that. There's nowhere in the rules that says a natural 20 lets you cut a dragon's wing off.
Yeah, well, because the rules would just be like you deal double damage, and there aren't really any rules at all about decapitation or dismemberment.
Right? Like, there's some rules that are kind of like a called strike, where it's like you could take a minus penalty to hit to aim for a body part, but they don't actually tell you how that would work. And I'm not even sure that I read that on an official source, or just Matt Mercer said it at some point.
I'm reasonably certain that called strikes are homebrew ruling that a lot of people like, because called strikes are cool, but...
Honestly, one of my favorite mechanics that I homebrew is the yo-yo punishment. So... As you're aware, when someone gets knocked down twice in one fight, I have them roll on the lingering injury table. Because, for me, it doesn't make sense for someone to die, and then you give them back 1 hit point, and then they die again, and you give them back 1 hit point. For that to just do nothing to you.
Right.
So I like putting that with if you die a second time, roll on this lingering injury table, because this can cost you an eye. Which is what you get. And the thing is... I've been described as a DM where it's like, you're fun, you're joking, you're happy, then you just murder us. I'm like, yeah, I need to make sure you understand the stakes are real.
Right.
I have absolutely no problem going along with player shenanigans, but I publicly roll and I let the dice decide who lives or dies. I take that shit completely out of my hands. I've never killed a player because I roll publicly. The dice kill players. And usually if a party member wants to live, I will leave enough quest hooks that it's completely reasonable to save, resurrect, or that character. But sometimes people enjoy dying.
Yeah, I was going to say, having played in several of your games, like, a character only actually dies if they want to, for the most part. Because you'll give the party some sort of way to resurrect them, or you'll give them some sort of out, like, oh, there was a magic stone here that protected you from actually dying, but you're resurrected into a new form, or
the hippies that had the resurrection pool.
The resurrection pool, yeah. That was pretty great.
But sometimes players forget they're trying to play a game with friends because they're too busy. I don't want to say being self-absorbed, but it's weird. Sometimes people will think your fictional ideas are less valid than their fictional ideas when it's all equally fictional. And they'll be like, well, that wouldn't work. It's like, but you don't decide that as the player, what would work or not. So in the case of Philip got turned to stone.
Oh, poor Philip.
And that was a joke, because Philip got turned to stone. I had like 30 ways for Philip to be unturned from stone. And then the party's like, yeah, no, Philip's just dead to us. We're just mounting him on a wall. Like, I'm like, I gave you a wish. You could have just wished Philip back to life. Like a literal wish.
Ooh, I don't know. Last time I wished someone back to life, it didn't bring back the one person I wanted to bring back.
Yeah, but I also have to mix things up a bit so people don't get complacent and try and predict me.
For some context.
Oh, by all means, this is a great story.
Richard says he rolls publicly. And we were fighting an enemy that had the Black Razor, which decapitates you on a natural 20. So, player had just created a new character. We found him in the dungeon with the enemy that had this Black Razor. And Richard managed to roll 2 critical hits in a row, decapitating the head of the new player and decapitating one of the heads of the other players. So then my character had a Tanuki wish, I guess.
Let's say a Tanuki wish.
It was a tea kettle that had a Tanuki instead of a genie in it.
I love that. I stand by it. I was doing a whole Gara of the Funk thing, never quite panned out correctly, but still, Tanuki wish.
So my character wishes for all of his friends to come back to life, and I was kind of hoping, as a player, that it would resurrect the new character. But alas, the new character didn't have time to become Thedrig's friend.
But this is why I'm a fair DM, and I've stated that characters only die if a player doesn't want to live, or if the party doesn't want them to live. Because I asked the players, are you Thedrig's friend? You wished all of Thedrig's friends back to life, and I said, and I quote, do you consider yourself Thedrig's friend? So the only condition to being resurrected is if they considered themselves your friend. To your group of friends playing a board game, their fictional character just had to think of you as a friend to live. That's not on me. Like, all you had to do was be friends. That was the resurrection challenge, and they didn't get resurrected.
But then, even funnier was that
but
the character.
Shout out to Thedrig, by the way. I just have to finish the story a bit because it's so good. Characters that got resurrected were every villain, because Thedrig befriended every villain, and all of them died not knowing that Thedrig had betrayed them. So they all got brought back to life because they considered themselves Thedrig's friend, but the party member did not. Including the baby dragon with the flaming sword on its tail and the crown of bones.
Cedric is definitely one of my favorite characters I've ever played. He didn't realize that you can't just be friends with everybody.
No, apparently you can. It worked.
Friends.
To be fair, he proved you could just be friends with anybody. That was a proof of concept. It worked. Unlike poor Shendu, like, the number of times you've died because of the party, not because of me, is truly absurd.
Oh. That's the saddest story. Poor Shendu. In a one-on-one death pit fight duel, and he tries to fight dirty, and then the party doesn't help him.
No, they just ate popcorn and watched you die. That's not on me. And that's what I keep saying as a DM. It's like, your guys' deaths aren't on me. I give you so many outs, it's not even funny. You just have to, like, care about each other a little bit. Did you know that if they'd fired a shot, the audience was going to come up in revolt, create a distraction for you to leave? I had this scripted. All they had to do was help.
All they had to do was help. Shendu was about to take over that goblin camp.
Oh, I had this campaign scripted. I loved the you flip into a villain and conquer Middle-earth campaign. That sounded great.
D&D is definitely a fantastically fun experience if your DM is willing to be flexible.
But the players also have that's the thing is, the players also have to be willing to be flexible. And I'm not going to say there's good or bad D&D players, but there's good or bad D&D players. And it's completely based on how flexible they are. It's not how good of a storyteller you are. It's not how good you understand the rules or the mechanics. It's not how fast and quippy and responsive you are. It's, are you willing to yes and each other? Like, taking this play-by-post campaign, for example. One of the party members is a shifter bard whose means of casting spells is ankle bells and dance numbers. And they're from like a warrior tribe. But they're yes-anding everybody at every opportunity. And now they have a baby owlbear that lives out with them. And the reason that I adore this player is they don't know what all their spells do. They don't know what all their attacks are. And most of their turns are bonus action do something. But they're so on board for everyone else's ideas that it makes it flow. Like, they'll be like, I'm going to cure wounds them, then I'm going to run behind to split the enemy fire so we can't both be blasted. I'm like, it's those few extra lines that really make it. Or it's like, it's like, I've just grown attached to them. But it's like, you could easily use the my character wouldn't help them excuse. But they know above table that they're still a game with friends. But then you get other players like, my character wouldn't help you, and then they just watch Cedric die. Or the other player I really love, his character Bowl, the hyper I want to be a hero even though I'm actually just a rich kid who got cursed by the rabbit. Like, it's just been like impromptu monologuing in every circumstance, and there's just been such good monologues. Like, they're like, Lord Dragon, please if I may, spareth thy team, and we will spread word of your glory. I'm like, perfect. That was a perfect speech. Of course I'm going to let that work.
Well, I mean, that's not to say that you can't have fun being a stickler for the rules.
No, you can't. You really can't in this game. I'm going to stop you right there. Rules lawyers in D&D don't understand the point of the game. Because you can ask for a clarification, but if you're fighting your DM, you can't win. You literally cannot win, but you're breaking the narrative and the imaginary flow. So, to give an exact example of this from my current group, I had a player row in a wild magic table, and it turned them into a potted plant. I'm like, you guys don't know how long. And then a player's like, well, I read the table, and don't worry, it only lasts a round. That completely took away every player's opportunity to roleplay the scene.
Right.
By them saying, oh, I know above table that it's just going to last a turn, no one do anything about it, prevented anyone from interacting and enjoying what had happened.
Right.
So I'm firmly against rules lawyering, because if you stop my ability to be flexible, I can't let you be flexible back, and I can't tell the story. So when a player says something like, actually that should have only been 5 damage, I'm fine with that, because it's a quick recital. Like, but if they were to ask a question like, excuse me, I have evasion, do I take half? Yeah, absolutely. But if you tell me I can't do something, or you say, our characters are only level 3, how are we supposed to fight a dragon? You've taken all the fun out of it because you're supposed to be scared. Right? Or at least your characters are supposed to pretend to be afraid. But if you're looking at stats and numbers and be like, yeah, there's no reason we should be worried because I do 30 DPS a round with a smite, you might as well just go play WoW.
Well, I mean, I guess that is probably actually part of the reason that 5th edition of D&D has become so much more popular than other editions. And I sincerely hope that some of our audience members are people who aren't actually that interested in D&D and might actually find someone who can help them enjoy it as we do. Because the older editions of D&D, are just mean. To call back to a prior comment you made about the sphere of annihilation.
I'm so mad at that. I'll never not be mad at that.
It's totally 100% a trap, where there's just, it's a black sphere inside of a statue's mouth, and if you put your hand in there, you die. But it says right in the description that it can't be detected by detect traps, and it can't be detected by detect magic. And the only way to find out that this dragon's mouth statue is trapped is to fall for the trap and die.
Which is just
and that
no.
It's a holdover from older versions of D&D, where the expectation was that your character was going to die, and you were going to have to make 4 or 5 different characters. You would need backup characters to be able to make it through any given dungeon, and it was just mean. Like, I don't. Part
of why it was so mean, though, was the amount of content they had. So if you only have 4 dungeons that exist, and someone's like, I paid $20 for these 4 dungeons. And this is back before D&D was an acting class, right? You need to actually make it that people felt like they had their value, because this has to hold you over for 6 months of D&Ding. Now, there's such a truly stupid amount of D&D content that without spending a dime, you could manage to get... I have more D&D content than I'll feasibly ever use.
Right.
Like, there's no way I'm ever going to run all 10 campaigns I have to completion and use all the content in them.
Oh yeah, and there's no way anyone's ever going to play all the races, because there's got to be like 100 races by now. You could fill a reincarnation table with a D100 with every single number having a unique race.
I really need to update my table.
Probably.
But like, I'm just going to give you a snippet from this play-by post, which has been a truly eye-opening experience, which is going to change how I run my table games. Because one of my players mentioned specifically, when they're put on the spot, they feel pressured by other players to just say and go things. But when they have time to think about it, they can give really good descriptions. And a lot of it is people, your higher energy players will almost cut off each other. And I spend a lot of time trying to give equal screen time. Because here's a paragraph I got. Ari feels a blast of cold come her way. Just as it's coming in, she shifts into her form and dodges. She lands, still standing barely. Luckily, cats have 9 lives. Gnomes can't say the same, though. Her little party member's creature appears to have done something in act of protection, but it wasn't enough to keep Treble the gnome alive. She sees the strange creature curl up below his frozen blades, poofing away. Darling, I cannot lose 2 of you in one go, she reaches out, and gently lays her hands on Treble's icy body. Heat and life course through her hand and force its way through his icy exterior. Then she runs the fuck away 30 feet to get some cover. That is such a good turn! Because mechanically, she could have said I walk up, cast Cure Words, and then use my bonus action to shift and I run away. That was much better, right? Like, trembles. And I try and encourage players to do that, but when players start metagaming with each other and start yelling at each other what they should do, I find a lot of times they'll be like, Karl will say something amazing. Hey, you are Karl. And it'll be like, okay, I'm going to stone shape a cage around them and then drag it into the lava. And they're like, no, we need you to heal. He's like, all right, I'll go cast Cure Wounds.
Oh.
And I'm like, but fiery death lava cage, no. And I, as the DM, die a little inside.
Another kind of example of that, where when you put people on the spot and then they just don't know what to do, is like, we're on the upper level and we see an enemy down below, and I have the power to glide down and land on top of the enemy. So I tell the parties, like, okay, you guys go down there, just be a distraction, and I'm going to glide down and land on top of the enemy.
For the context, because I feel the need to say this, the enemy is a golem with a giant goldfish in a bowl replacing the head of the golem that is being piloted by the goldfish. I just need to share this story whenever possible, because that's truly amazing. But please, continue.
But, like, my plan was very straightforward. I told them exactly what they needed to do, and it didn't really matter how they distracted the golem. It was just they needed to go down and do something.
I do have to clarify one bit. The part of your plan where you're going to use destroy water around the goldfish so it suffocates. Please continue.
But it took the party like 15 minutes of like real time to actually decide that they in fact just needed to go down the stairs and say hi.
Well, one thing I've started implementing for another new rule is people will spend a lot of time planning, but as I mentioned earlier, they like to make assumptions about what's possible in the fictional world where anything's possible.
Mm-hmm.
In a recent Critical Role one-shot, what they did is they planned a heist, but instead of letting the party sit there and plan it, which they knew would take 17 hours of screen time, they said,
Right.
You've arrived at the heist, it's already in motion, I'm giving each of you one flashback token. When you're faced with a problem, you can use that token to say how you prepared for it, and you'll operate under the assumption you succeeded. So if you find a safe, you can be like, I brought my safe crackers kit. And then we have a flashback, you tell us roleplay-wise how you got your kit, and then we assume you do the thing. And I'm definitely going to employ more of that going forward, because you can't actually plan for D&D's contingencies, because a dragon could come out of the sky and rip open the plane, and then a bunch of golems will turn into jazz musicians. Like, you can't actually predict D&D.
Yeah, that's again with one of the older holdovers, and this is something that still is in 5th edition, which I don't know if they're planning on releasing a new edition or not.
They're planning to do a 5.5 soon, and I'll get more on that later.
Well, a lot of people think that the release of Tasha's Cauldron of Everything is equivalent to 5.5 because of some of the significant changes.
Yeah.
But specifically for spellcasters, what I'm talking about, this is something that didn't change for Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. Spellcasters prepare spells, but there's no way you can know what spells to prepare in advance. And so a lot of spells don't really see a lot of use because people don't prepare them because they're not useful for a variety of situations, right? So I think this is something that I learned from you. I just say screw it to preparing spells because that it just limits the amount of fun that a person can have as a spellcaster if they come in and oh, my spell's not prepared, so I can't actually use that one.
Yeah, so what I do, specifically for any D&D fans tuning into our 34th episode of our podcast just to talk about D&D, is that I keep track of the number of spells you're allowed to prepare, but any you don't have prepared, you can prepare on the fly. So if it says you can prepare 12 spells, that's how many different spells you can pick from a day, but you don't have to have them picked in advance. And that's my entire thing, is you don't have to have them prepared in advance, you can prepare them on the spot. And I want to put in more of those mechanics, like I mentioned with that heist mechanic of the idea that, oh, I did this thing in advance. I almost want to give each player once a session, oh, I did this in advance, to stop them from planning things that are ultimately almost pointless and focus more on doing things. Because if I give everybody once a day an oops, actually I did this token, it can remove that complete planning loop where people talk in circular logic. Because you can just be like, oh yeah, I definitely brought a grappling hook. I'm going to use my token and I brought a grappling hook. Or yeah, I prepared water breathing. I'll use my token to prepare water breathing.
There's the one heist that we did where we all planned to break in, and then one player had a bad roll. They're a barbarian, so they get angry and throw someone out the window. And it was fine role playing. I thought it was super funny personally. But the rest of the party was quite upset because we had spent an hour of real time planning this heist, and then it went wrong with 2 bad dice rolls.
Which is why I'd love to have that mechanic in place, because then it could have been expecting him to fail, we'll proceed to sneak in through the other door as he acts as a diversion.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, things could have panned out quite differently if the party wasn't so invested into a particular plan that you can't foresee every angle, especially when there's dice involved and it's supposed to be random.
And to follow up on that too, for one thing, I keep saying the best D&D trait you can have is yes and ability. So in this particular case, when they threw a girl out the window and chaos started, if they were an yes and team, like I said, they could have been alright, using this chaos, we go around the score and break in. But they were choice paralysis because their own plans no longer applied.
Right.
And they weren't willing to try and barter with me. And be well, because this is happening, can we have advantage on our stealth rolls? I would have allowed it, for sure. but yes and ability for sure is one of the big things I like in D&D. Also, I call this the railroading paradox, and I'm going to go into a bit about this. Internet will always tell you, don't railroad your players, don't railroad, you're blocking creativity. I find restrictions breed creativity, and telling players to fight against their dungeon masters is super disingenuous. Because the reason we put out things that are obvious plot hooks is because we cannot prepare everything on the fly all the time forever. We're sentient creatures who sleep. So, my players will often build the exact opposite of what would work in the scenario, and do the exact opposite thinking they're outsmarting me, when in reality, they're losing out on the things I prepared for them, because they've been conditioned to be like, hey, if the dragon's flying north, we're not going to fall for that, we're going to walk south. I didn't come up with a south. Who's playing a game called Dungeons and Dragons and doesn't want to go into the dungeon or fight the dragon? And they're like, actually, no, we'd rather go open a small bakery. I'm like, if you had told me this in session 0, if you had given me a memo in your character's backstory has always wanted to open a bakery, I am prepared to run Bakery Sim. It would be my pleasure to run Bakery Sim. But if you give me no idea that's what you're going to do, how could I possibly have Bakery Sim prepared?
I mean, this isn't to attack players that play like that. I mean, it does lead to a lot of very interesting and dynamic situations. But it's definitely it takes its toll on the dungeon master to have players fight them at every turn. You know, it is really hard to prepare. You prepare stuff in advance that you think that people are going to like and that they're going to do, and then they go completely the opposite direction, and then trying to come up with stuff on the fly. I mean, fortunately for Richard and I, as Dungeon Masters, we have a large wealth of material to draw from, and can pretty easily find something that'll fit the situation.
I'm really good at it.
Masters,
I mean,
a lot of other Dungeon Masters might only have the module that they're running,
especially if they're new. Because, like, to put me into perspective, I'm a best-selling fantasy author, and I still get stumped when players completely like, oh, I'm just going to leave the map. They'll literally be like, oh, it's Richard, so we'll just make a portal to hell and go through it. I'm sure he'll just have another campaign ready to go. And I do, because I'm a psychopath. But, like, then you'll put Karl in a session to run for these same players, and they'll be like, Karl will be like, okay, the fairy leads you to Enchanted Woods, and they're like, nah, we're gonna go to Vegas. And you're like, but, okay, I guess we're going to Vegas. And the thing is, Dungeon Masters are rare. And you don't want to break your Dungeon Masters, and you want to make new ones happen. So maybe, like, if the Dungeon Master's clearly implying you should look into it, it's not a bad thing to, like, go into the trope a bit to just help them out a little. Instead of all 5 players having completely different objectives and running in completely different directions. Like, the meme is don't split the party. And the reason that I usually murder people when they split the party isn't because I want to murder them for how dare they. It's because I have not balanced these fights for 2 characters to show up to fight this dragon. And then when 2 characters show up to fight the dragon, because I believe in playing a board where I put the pieces on the board, and I don't change or adjust them in the fly. I don't make fights harder, and I don't make them weaker. I just put them there, and if you show up with 2 people having not slept in 3 days, and you die, that's on you. And if you actually die, that usually means your friends had no desire to save you, because, as I've mentioned, every time Karl's died, it's been from deep personal betrayal of the players, not the Dungeon Master.
Well,
Philip.
The players loved Thedric, though. So Thedric made it to the end of that campaign because the players just felt so endeared to him.
One of my favorite things that ever happened, though, is when the book said this door has a scythe that puts down on someone's head, and you put your ear to the door. I'm just like, well, I like even copy-pasted the paragraph. It's like, a scythe comes down on your head. Sorry.
But he didn't die. Like,
Thedric was hard to kill.
Keeping Thedric alive for sure.
Not just that, but so clerics, people are like, cleric, first aid doctor, and you're like, cleric, tank, hundreds of HP, full plate mail, 7 feet tall, 1,000 pound metal behemoth. Like, I had to invent ways to kill Cedric. Which is why people are like, why does Cedric keep falling? I'm like, because the people hitting him break their weapons and realize their only strategy to survive is to shove Cedric off things and hope he goes away.
And then Cedric just looks at the confused, why aren't you my friends?
And then Cedric's like, hey, I built you a golden crown, Demon Lord. Want to be buddies? He's like, that's a really thoughtful gift. Don't you care that I'm literally the Fire Lord, Terror of the Skies? I also made you a sword. Huh. I really assumed you were here to kill me or something. Yeah, okay. And then the party comes in and murders the poor demon, and then you resurrect them later because they thought they were your friend. You never betrayed them. But I think with that, as our episode comes down to a close, thank you everybody for tuning in to Deep Space and Dungeons and Dragons. Mm-hmm. We have our Twitch streams on Tuesdays probably that happen whenever. Just follow Richard Kivas on Twitch and then you'll get alerted when we decide to do things. Last time we did the trolley problem, which will be up on YouTube and Twitch later on, where we went through moral decisions and learned that, sure, murdering a child's okay, but we cannot mess with Skynet.
Do not mess with Skynet. Also, my opinion on money changed when they promoted me to being the head of the hospital. I don't know why they made me the head of the hospital. I think I would have been a terrible CEO of hospital, but they promoted me anyways, and it's like, oh, I guess I better do a good job now.
Now the worst was when they put us on the hook for global warming. But definitely tune in and watch that video. That was a very fun stream. And
that was
the Waltz of Blades Deluxe with its beautiful new hardcover artwork by A.G. Nonsuch is available for sale. And if you just type my name, Richard Kivas, into the internet, you'll find my book, you'll find my podcast. I'm pretty famous now somehow. So thank you everybody for tuning in. And remember, if you want us to cover specific topics on Dungeons and Dragons, leave comments on our YouTube videos. If you want this just to turn into a D&D podcast, or you want us to do a second podcast about D&D, we will. If you want me to just ask Karl romantic questions, and that's our show, we will do it, but we need to hear from you. So feel free to comment on those videos, and have a wonderful time.
Yeah, have a great week. Hopefully we'll sort of maybe see you next time through the power of the internet.
As our podcast becomes just a rom-com with us. Take care.
Bye.